I will now invite Ambassador Hervé Delphin, the Ambassador of the European Union to India, to deliver his keynote address. Before his posting to India, he headed policy planning at the European External Action Service and earlier led EU humanitarian responses in the Middle East and the neighborhood. He has also been a visiting professor at the College of Europe. In 2014, he was awarded the Legion d'Honneur. I hope I'm getting my French right. As many of you have noticed, or should notice, Ambassador Delphin's insights prominently feature in the latest issue of India's World. If you have not read it, please read it, not because I did the interview with him, but because Hervé gave an insightful interview to the magazine. The interview will tell you that Hervé is a man of many parts. Ambassador Delphin, over to you.
Sehr geehrter Dr. Luchaita, dear Professor Jacob, dear Professor Rajamohan, Excellencies, dear friends, ambassadors of the EU and representative of other states, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. When President von der Leyen met with Prime Minister Modi on the occasion of the visit, unprecedented visit of the College of the European Commission to Delhi last February, she told him the planets are aligned. And she was not only referring to a very rare phenomenon of alignment of 7 planets of our solar system that took place on that very day, 28th of February. She was using this as a fitting image to characterize the dynamics of the relationship between the EU and India. So when Professor Mohan and Jacob came to see me last July to tell me about their intention to release an issue of India's World dedicated to the EU, I could not help but thinking about the same image of alignment of the planets, because I knew, they didn't know, that the release was to coincide with the planned release of a landmark policy document on the EU side, the famous joint communication of the Commission and High Representative Kallas, to the Council and the European Parliament on a new EU-India strategic agenda. And guess what? As a feat of sheer coincidence, or fortune, some might say, the joint communication was published on the 17th of September, which is, as you all know, the birthday of Prime Minister Modi. So I'm certainly more familiar with geopolitics than cosmology or eschatology. But on every account, it would seem that as if EU and India have a tryst with destiny, a common destiny. This said, this inevitably invites to serious examination. To what extent are we both, on both sides, ready to seize the historical moment and engage in deeper strategic ties? What are the elements of the strategic equation that we must square to transform a latent potential into a lasting reality? So my address today will visit some of these key terms of the strategic equation posed to EU and India, namely circumstances, vision, will, and capacity, and how they can turn into a winning formula. On circumstances, the great geopolitical reshuffling that we've been witnessing in the past decade is still in labor. The US-China relations have been increasingly locked into a systems-level competition, reverberating across the global chessboard. Nationalist politics are back, driven by identity and communal reflexes, conjuring up historical claims and turbocharged by a technological race to ensure supremacy. The return to power politics is leading to a retreat of the multilateral system and the international law. In this environment of tensions and transformations, EU and India are in different positions, not least geographically, but at the core they face similar challenges. Their economic development and their security are under stress. Their vision of a rule-based and cooperative global order is undermined. Against this geopolitical backdrop, President von der Leyen, in her keynote address here in Delhi, and I want to thank India's World for having hosted her on that occasion. The speech that she delivered was EU-India, a consequential partnership for the 21st century. She said, I quote, "This world is fraught with danger, but I believe this modern version of great power competition is an opportunity for Europe and India to reimagine their partnership. In many ways, the EU and India are uniquely placed to respond to this challenge together." So this statement reflected a deeper assessment on the EU side that EU and India offer each other important strategic options to de-risk the economic turmoil and the security uncertainties, to tap into our complementarities and combine respective strengths and scale to serve each other's interests. This strategic compulsion has been in the making for some time on the EU side. The proposal to relaunch the free trade agreement negotiation and to propose to India the setting up of a Trade and Technology Council back in April 2022 were part of this EU reassessment to engage with India more decisively. Since from Brussels, however, it looked like the EU was not really on India's own strategic horizon, and you just somehow confirmed that. And I just had as an anecdote, I recall the cover page of the book released a year ago by Sriram Shaurya, called Friends, India's Closest Strategic Partners, and he put all the flags of all the key partners, but nowhere, the EU flag is nowhere to be seen. So there were positive signs, though, when Dr. Jaishankar pronounced his famous phrase in his book, The India Way, time to engage America, manage China, cultivate Europe, reassure Russia, bring Japan into play. There was some recognition that Europe needed more attention. But it was a Europe conceived in its multiple geographies and political reality, the EU itself being only one of these. The EU is still and was and still a strange animal to many in India. And often the question I see is why we Indians should we deal with the EU when it's easier to deal with individual member states or smaller groups? The answer lies probably in the fact that the EU and its member states, in the face of epochal changes, were compelled to a dramatic necessity of reviewing and adapting to their collective strategic stance. Because of factors such as Brexit, COVID, Russians waging war on EU borders, a more challenging and unpredictable transatlantic partner, growing imbalances and distortion in the relations with China, all becoming a more systemic rival, the EU had to define its own strategic concept of European sovereignty and strategic autonomy. And the fact is that the EU member states are increasingly articulating their grand strategy within the frame of the EU, which by consequence become indeed a strategic actor, if not a reluctant one, at least a strategic actor. With the EU moving closer to a strategic posture of strategic autonomy, the assessment of the EU and its member states as valuable strategic partners are certainly gained weight in Delhi, not least in the light of India's own strategic conundrum and significant challenges posed by China, Russia, and the USA. In short, circumstances of necessity to de-risk, to hedge by diversifying partnerships and affirmation of greater strategic autonomy certainly provide a strong impetus for deepening our strategic ties. However, you need a frame to project and guide the relationship. This is the vision, the second point. The joint communication released recently clearly articulates such a political vision for the relationship as seen from Brussels' perspective. It proposes an ambitious, consistent, and concrete agenda for the EU-India relationship based on 5 pillars. You have probably read them. Let me just mention them. Prosperity and sustainability, aimed at boosting trade, investment, and economic ties with a focus on supply chains and clean transition. Technology and innovation, working together on critical emerging technologies to reduce dependencies and leapfrog by combining our assets and strength. Security and defense by deepening cooperation on and addressing threats and risks in specific areas of mutual concern, and cooperating on defense industry. 4, Connectivity on global issues, as we see each other as partnering as global partners on issues of connectivity, such as IMEC, the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridors, on trilateral cooperation or shaping global governance and in response to transnational challenges. And last, enablers for our partnerships to thrive with increased mobility and circulation of skills, connecting business communities, as well as think tanks and academia. Each of these pillars contain numerous proposals and initiatives for joint action that could deliver tangible results, such as, and let me just name a few, innovation hubs to mobilize startups and facilitate their market uptake, blue valleys as dedicated conducive platform for private sector engagement in selected value chains, a TTC 0.2 zooming in on critical supply chain like semiconductors, active pharma ingredients, clean tech and biotech, a gateway office to facilitate mobility of skilled workers in ICT sector, and a security and defense partnership as enabler for defense industrial cooperation. So at the core, the joint communication proposed nothing less than greater connection and integration of our ecosystems. It's not short-term hedging, it's a long-term investment. So the EU's offer is concrete, is ambitious. 3, we all know that ultimately the political will must be mustered to turn aspiration into realization. The reference to India as a priority in the political guidelines issued by President von der Leyen for the new Commission a year ago was an important signal that only a few picked up at the time. But the visit to Delhi of the President and the College of Commissioners last February, or the recent visit of the group of the ambassadors of the EU Political and Security Committee were clear indications that the EU literally walks its talk. There are powerful political messages of confidence and readiness from the EU side to engage. And leaders on both sides are fully behind. The President of the European Council, Antonio Costa, President Ursula von der Leyen, the Member States, and Prime Minister Modi himself, who referred to the EU-India as natural strategic partners, I quote. This is helped also by growing maturity in the discussion on strategic issues, as exemplified by the holding of the first strategic dialogue at the level of HRVP Kallas and EM Jashankar last June. Our partnership can deliver mutual benefits, but also further our respective global aspiration to shape the global agendas. EU and India together represent 25% of world GDP, 25% of world population. The EU is India's biggest trading partners in good. We both stand as cooperative global actors committed to a rule-based order. We see each other as pole of stability and ballast in a multipolar world. We have largely converging interests in the Indo-Pacific region. We both seek to address global challenges and promote public goods, whether in the area of climate action, sustainable development, financing for development, AI governance, space governance, just to name a few. We both reject wars of aggression and terrorism, or economic coercion for that matter. And as large democracies, we attach importance to the respect and promotion of human values. But as said before, we also have to be clear-eyed on those issues on which we are not aligned. And let's be clear, there is a Russia question, specifically linked to its war of aggression against Ukraine and its hostile attitude towards the EU, as seen in the past weeks and days, and the violation of European airspace by Russian drones. The participation of an Indian military contingent in the Russia-Belarus military exercise Zapad 2025, or the question of sanctions and of Russian oil have been much in discussion in European capitals lately, but also here in Delhi on the occasion of the PSC visit. Ending the war in Ukraine with Russia, engaging genuinely in a ceasefire and in peace talk is certainly what everybody wants. But it seems that one person, President Putin, has definitely other views. India has pronounced itself very clearly for peace. Russia is a strategic partner for India, and India wants to deepen its ties with the EU. This will require further consideration in Delhi on how to square those terms. Let me quote at this point an article in the Indian newspaper that I read recently, as it gives some sensible pointers, and I quote, "It is time, though, for India to stop seeing Europe through the eyes of Russia, as it has since independence. While Delhi must maintain a productive relationship with Moscow, it also needs to balance its ties with Brussels and Moscow. The rapidly rising stakes in India's relationship with the European Union requires such a recalibration." End of quote. When it comes to questions of democracy and human rights, Europe and India are what they are because of their belief in democracy, human rights, individual dignity and equality, putting people at the center. We both enjoy rich cultures, multifaceted civilizational expression of our diversity, both unique and diverse, and both united in our own diversity. These shared values are admittedly under threat. We should cultivate them, both for our own sake and for our common good. Those shared values are a foundational element of our partnership, and they give it deep meaning about what we stand for. So deepening our strategic ties will therefore demand sensitivity and respect to navigate our differences, the acceptance of not being fully aligned, and preserving a space for honest discussion. The final point I want to make is about the agency of our system to drive the partnership forward, our capacity to act. We represent two big bureaucracies with different cultures and approaches. In order to keep the momentum and the direction, you need agency to deliver and focus on concrete targets. The current joint roadmap that governs the relationship, 2020-2025, represents a list of no less than 118 actions. Both sides agree that the completion rate today stands at 80+%. But probably there were too many actions and not necessarily all formulated in terms of real deliverables. So that now that the strategic case is clear, we must focus on delivery. Deliver on the FTA by the end of the year. The 13th round earlier this September was really a bit of a missed opportunity to make some breakthrough. The EU was and is still ready to conclude on a meaningful package. We look forward to India engaging in earnest and moving, like the EU has shown readiness to do so, towards a mutually beneficial deal. Deliver also on a new EU-India strategic roadmap to be negotiating between the two sides with a view to have it endorsed at the next EU-India summit early 26 in Delhi, turning words into action, ambition into reality. And to act more decisively, we need a stronger institutional governance of the relationship. The joint communication proposes mechanism of follow-up, of implementation and accountability, more frequent engagement of the political level. If you think we haven't had a summit since 2021, we certainly need to update ourselves on this. It also pleads, the joint communication, for a whole of system mobilization of all stakeholders, people to people, I mentioned, through exchange program in education, research, science and mobility of workers, business to business. Business will play a key role in driving our partnerships forward. Hence the proposal to set up an EU-India Business Forum of CEOs. Think tanks and experts will play an important role in the circulation of ideas, in distilling analysis that can inform policy deliberation. We need to increase our mutual literacy on each other. There is still a dearth of Indian experts in Brussels, and I would say a bit the same here in Delhi. Creating more familiarity is critical to update knowledge and develop mutual understanding, like EU stance on China, which is not fully appraised here in Delhi, or India's engagements with the Global South on multilaterals such as BRICS or the SCO. I therefore really salute India's World Initiative with this issue dedicated to Europe and EU-India. And I want really to thank all Indian experts and think tankers, some of whom are here in this hall today, who study EU-India relations. In conclusion, the degree of strategic convergence between the EU and India has never been greater, driven by convergence of our geopolitical, economic and security interests, complementarity of our respective needs and assets, scale of what we can offer to each other, will of our leaders. The trust and thrust in our relationship can take it to a new strategic level, a truly transformative partnership pact. This is Brussels' call to Delhi. Thank you for your attention.